the most prestigious hospitals in the city. The autumn breeze danced with yellow ginkgo leaves, and Treasure Nuru, a 26-year-old nurse, had to finish her night shift. Her eyes were heavy, her feet sore, but her spirit remained bright. She had always believed that kindness was the true language of medicine. Treasure had moved to South Korea 3 years earlier on a nursing exchange program. Her dedication, empathy, and calmness in emergencies made her loved by patients and colleagues alike, though her foreign accent and humble nature made her easy to overlook in such a large institution. That morning, as she stepped out of the hospital gates to catch a bus home, she noticed an elderly Korean woman struggling to cross the busy intersection in front of the hospital. Cars rushed past carelessly, horns blaring. The old woman's cane slipped, and she began to fall, right into the road. Without thinking twice, Treasure dropped her bag and ran into traffic. A car came speeding from the corner, its brakes screeching. Treasure threw herself toward the old woman, pushing her out of harm's way. The car stopped inches away, its tires burning on the asphalt. Treasure fell to the ground, scraping her knees, but she quickly turned to the trembling woman. "Halmiani, are you all right?" she gasped, holding the woman's hands. The old woman stared at her in shock, then smiled faintly through her tears. You saved me," she whispered. Security guards and staff rushed to the scene, recognizing the woman immediately, Madame Han So-young, the hospital founder and the mother of the current hospital director, Dr. Han Hae-kyun. Within minutes, Treasure was surrounded by doctors, nurses, and reporters, but she didn't care for attention. "Please take her inside," she said softly, brushing off her dusty uniform. "She needs to be checked." From his office on the 15th floor, Dr. Han Hae-kyun, the young and brilliant owner of Seoul Grace Medical, watched the CCTV footage replay over and over. He was in disbelief. His mother, his only family, had nearly died, and the woman who saved her was a nurse he had barely noticed before. He saw Treasure's face freeze on the screen, her eyes full of sincerity, her lips whispering comfort as she knelt beside his mother. Something in that image stayed with him. That evening, when he visited his mother in her hospital suite, Madame Han was already smiling. "That young nurse," she said warmly, "has more heart than most people I've ever met. You should meet her, Hae-kyun." And for the first time in years, his mother's tone carried something deeper than command. It carried admiration. The next morning, the hospital gathered for an official meeting. Treasure stood quietly in the back, still embarrassed by the previous day's attention. Then came the announcement. "Nurse Treasure Nuru," Dr. Hae-kyun's voice echoed through the auditorium, "for your courage, compassion, and exemplary service to this institution, you are hereby promoted to senior nurse of patient care and recovery." Applause filled the hall. Treasure's eyes widened, and her heart raced. She bowed deeply, unsure if she should even speak. As she lifted her gaze, she met Hae-kyun's eyes for the first time, deep, gentle, and observing her with quiet respect. "Thank you, sir," she said softly, and for a brief second he smiled. Over the next few weeks, Treasure's responsibilities grew, and so did her connection with Dr. Hae-kyun. He began to visit the recovery wing more often, under the pretense of checking reports. But everyone could sense something more. He admired how she comforted patients, how she treated everyone, from janitors to surgeons, with the same warmth. And she, though initially intimidated by his title and composed demeanor, began to see the man behind the authority. Caring, wounded, and lonely. One evening, Hae-kyun found Treasure sitting in the hospital garden after her shift, watching the city lights. "You saved my mother," he said softly, sitting beside her. "I owe you my world." Treasure shook her head. "No, sir, you owe me nothing. I only did what any nurse would do." He turned to her, his voice steady but tender. "Not everyone risks their life for a stranger. You did." Their eyes met, and silence fell between them. A silence that felt safe, warm, and full of something neither could name yet. Months passed. Treasure's work earned her national praise, and the hospital's reputation soared. Madame Han often invited her for tea, calling her the daughter I never had. But one evening, after a hospital charity gala, as snow began to fall outside, Haekyun walked up to her beneath the softly glowing lights of the garden she loved so much. "Treasure," he said, his breath visible in the cold air. "You came into my life as a light I didn't know I needed. You healed my mother's heart and mine." He knelt down, holding a velvet box. Inside sparkled a ring shaped like a tiny heartbeat. "Will you marry me?" Tears welled in her eyes. Her voice trembled. "Are you sure? I'm just a nurse from far away." He smiled gently. "You're not just anything. You're the reason I believe in miracles again." She nodded, her voice breaking into a whisper. "Yes, yes, I will." Their wedding was small but beautiful, held in the hospital's garden where their story began. Madame Han sat proudly in the front row, blessing the union of her son and the woman who had saved her life. Treasure became more than a nurse. She became a symbol of compassion, bridging cultures and hearts. Together, she and Haekyun expanded the hospital's charity wing, funding free healthcare for underprivileged patients across Asia and Africa. Years later, when people spoke of the Seoul Grace Medical Center, they didn't just talk about its technology or wealth. They talked about the love story that built its legacy. The Tanzanian nurse who saved a life, and the Korean man whose heart she healed in return. And together, they proved that love, like medicine, can heal anything. The married life between Treasure Nuru Han and Dr. Han Haekyun was nothing short of poetic. What had started as an act of bravery in front of the hospital now became the foundation of a deep and unbreakable bond between two souls from different worlds. Their union had initially raised a few eyebrows in Korea's elite society. Some whispered about their differences, race, nationality, and class. But none of that mattered to Haekyun. Whenever people doubted Treasure, he would simply smile and say, "She saved my mother, my hospital, and my heart. What more proof of grace do I need?" And indeed, Treasure carried herself with quiet dignity. Her warm laughter, fluent but slightly accented Korean, and her unwavering compassion soon melted every prejudice around her. She wasn't just the hospital director's wife. She became the heart of Seoul Grace Medical Center. After their marriage, Treasure proposed an idea that touched Haekyun's heart deeply, a project called Healing Without Borders. It was a medical outreach initiative that sent doctors and nurses to poor communities in both South Korea and Africa, offering free healthcare to those who could never afford it. Treasure often led the missions herself. Whether it was in a remote Korean fishing village or the rural outskirts of Dar es Salaam, she treated every patient with the same gentle hands and radiant smile. One day, while on a medical mission in Tanzania, Treasure stood beside a group of children who had gathered to watch her work. Haekyun, standing a few feet away, captured the moment on his phone. The love of his life surrounded by smiling children under the named her Han Nuru, combining both their surnames, a symbol of unity between two worlds. When Madame Han held her granddaughter for the first time, she whispered, "This child carries the grace of her mother and the wisdom of her father. She will make the world softer." Treasure smiled, holding Haekyun's hand tightly. "We will raise her to love, not to judge, to heal, not to hate." And that promise became the new foundation of their family. As time passed, Seoul Grace Medical grew into an international hospital with branches in Africa, led by Treasure herself as global director of care. She became a figure of inspiration, a Tanzanian woman who rose from humble beginnings to become the wife of a Korean magnate and the heart behind a global health movement. Whenever she and Haekyun walked together through the hospital halls, staff members would bow respectfully, whispering stories of their kindness. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Haekyun surprised her with a small ceremony on the same hospital rooftop where she once saved his mother. There were no cameras, no media, just a circle of staff, family, and friends. Under the gentle moonlight, he held her hand and said softly, "You once said saving someone's life was the most powerful act of love. But Treasure, you didn't just save one life. You saved mine, and every life that this hospital now touches because of you." Tears glistened in her eyes as she replied, "And you taught me that love isn't about where we're from, but where we choose to heal together." Years later, at the entrance of Seoul Grace Medical Center, a bronze statue stood tall. It wasn't of a doctor or a CEO, but of a nurse kneeling beside an elderly woman, her hands extended in compassion. At the base of the statue were the words, "Love heals more deeply than medicine ever can." In honor of Nurse Treasure Nuru Han, the heart that changed Soul Grace forever. And every morning, as the sun rose over the hospital, its light would shine first upon that statue. A reminder to every soul that sometimes, one act of courage can rewrite the story of a lifetime. The years passed softly for Treasure and Haekyun, wrapped in a kind of love that never faded, only deepened. Their days were filled with laughter and late-night talks, their nights, with slow dances and whispered promises beneath the moonlit window of their penthouse. Treasure had become the rhythm of Haekyun's life, the quiet breath behind his strength. And Haekyun, though once known as Seoul's most disciplined and untouchable CEO, became a man who smiled easily and loved openly because of her. Every evening, after the hospital quieted and the city lights shimmered across the Han River, Haekyun would come home to find Treasure in the kitchen, wearing one of his shirts, humming softly as she cooked. He'd slip behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, his breath brushing her neck. "Do you know," he'd whisper, "that you smell like jasmine and peace?" Treasure would giggle softly, leaning into his embrace. "And you smell like stress and coffee, Dr. Han. You need me to balance you out." He would laugh, turning her around to face him, eyes glowing with affection. "Then don't ever stop. Be my balance forever." Their dinners were less about food and more about connection. Laughter, teasing, and quiet confessions between sips of wine. Sometimes he'd feed her himself, just to watch the warmth of her smile light up the room. One late evening, a soft rain began to fall over Seoul. Treasure stood on their balcony, her fingers outstretched to feel the droplets. Haekyun watched her silently, her brown skin glistening under the silver light, her hair damp, her smile gentle. "Come inside, you'll catch a cold," he called. She turned, eyes playful. "Or you could come out here and catch it with me." He stepped out without hesitation, letting the rain soak through his shirt. Then he reached for her, pulling her close, and kissed her beneath the falling rain. It wasn't a hurried kiss. It was deep, slow, and full of everything words couldn't say. When they finally pulled away, Treasure whispered, "You still make my heart race like the first day I saw you." "And you," he murmured, brushing a raindrop from her cheek, "still make me forget that I ever lived a day before you." Every night, before bed, they shared a small ritual, a cup of tea and a moment of silence. Treasure would sit on the edge of their bed, her legs curled beneath her, and Haekyun would rest his head on her lap as she ran her fingers through his hair. "Do you ever wonder," she'd say softly, "how one moment, one accident, brought us here?" He'd smile without opening his eyes. "No, because fate doesn't make mistakes." Then she'd bend down, her lips brushing his forehead. "You make love feel like breathing. And you," he'd whisper, looking up at her, "make life feel worth living." On weekends, they escaped to their private villa by the sea. Treasure loved to walk barefoot along the shore while Haekyun followed her with a quiet smile, his eyes drinking in her joy. One night, as the waves whispered against the sand, Treasure rested her head on his chest and said, "If love is a medicine, then I think we found the cure to loneliness." He tightened his arms around her, his voice low and husky. "And if love is a heartbeat, mine beats only because of you." The moon cast a golden shimmer over them as he kissed her again, slow and lingering, as if afraid the night might end too soon. There were times when words weren't needed at all. In the quiet of their home, the warmth between them spoke louder than anything. The way his hand always found hers, the way she brushed her fingers across his cheek when he looked tired, the way their hearts seemed to sync in rhythm whenever they lay side by side. It was all love, pure and unspoken. Some nights, they would dance barefoot in the living room. No music playing, just the sound of their laughter echoing through the air. Treasure would rest her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "That sound," she whispered once, "is my favorite song. And it beats," he murmured, kissing her hair, Only for you. Years might have passed, but for them, time only deepened what they shared. They had learned to love quietly, not with grand gestures, but with presence, patience, and touch. Every embrace, every kiss, every whispered, "I love you," became another thread in the tapestry of their forever. And even in the stillness of night, when the world outside slept, their hearts continued their endless conversation, one of passion, tenderness, and eternal devotion. Because for Treasure and Haekyun, love was not just something they felt. It was who they had become. Spring arrived like a dream, soft and golden, and for the first time in years, Treasure and Haekyun took a break from their endless hospital schedules. They boarded a private flight to Jeju Island, the emerald jewel of South Korea, a place where the sea whispered secrets and the wind carried the scent of love. Treasure had always wanted to visit Jeju. She'd seen it only in photos, fields of yellow canola flowers stretching toward the horizon, cliffs kissed by waves, and sunsets that looked like heaven touching the sea. When they arrived, Haekyun had secretly arranged for something special. A secluded villa by the ocean, hidden behind a grove of cherry blossoms, where only the sound of waves and wind could reach them. As they stepped into the villa, Treasure gasped softly. The glass walls opened directly to a panoramic view of the turquoise sea, and rose petals were scattered along the floor leading to the bedroom. She turned to him, eyes sparkling. "You planned all this?" Haekyun smiled, stepping closer. "You heal everyone else, Treasure. This weekend, let me heal you." The mornings in Jeju were peaceful, sunlight pouring through sheer curtains, waves murmuring outside. Treasure woke first, as she always did, her hair messy, her skin glowing in the soft light. She turned to see Haekyun sleeping beside her, his hand resting protectively on her waist. She brushed a stray lock from his forehead, smiling. "Even in sleep, you look like you're planning something serious," she teased. His eyes opened slowly, a lazy grin forming. "Only planning how to make you smile more." He pulled her closer, their lips meeting in a gentle kiss, one that started soft and soon deepened, like waves meeting shore. Every kiss between them felt like rediscovery, as if they were falling in love for the first time all over again. Later that day, they walked barefoot along the shoreline, the wind tugging playfully at Treasure's dress. Haekyun watched her twirl in the sand, her laughter mingling with the sea breeze. "Do you know," he said, walking up behind her, "that the ocean reminds me of you?" She turned, smiling. "Because I'm deep and mysterious?" He shook his head gently. "Because no matter how much I try to measure it, I can never reach the end of my love for you." Her laughter faded into silence as she looked into his eyes, that same gaze that once intimidated her, now softened by years of devotion. She touched his cheek and whispered, "Then let's drown in that love together." He kissed her again, right there on the sand, with the waves curling around their feet, the sky melting into shades of pink and gold. It was the kind of moment that existed outside of time. That evening, Haekyun lit a small fire outside their villa. The flames flickered between them as they sat wrapped in a blanket, sharing roasted chestnuts and wine. Treasure leaned against his shoulder. "I used to think love was something that fades, like a candle burning out." He glanced at her, eyes tender. "And now," she smiled, tracing circles on his chest with her finger. "Now I know love can be like this fire, glowing brighter the longer we feed it." He took her hand, kissing her knuckles. "Then I'll never let it fade." As the night deepened, he carried her inside, their laughter echoing softly. The rain began to fall outside again, tapping against the glass walls as they lay wrapped in each other's warmth. Between whispering, "I love you," and gentle caresses, the world outside disappeared. The next morning, Haekyun took Treasure on a drive through Jeju's countryside. They stopped by a hidden garden of camellias, blooming in red and white. He handed her a small silver locket. Inside was a photo of their wedding day, and a single line engraved beneath it, "Wherever you are, my heart follows." Tears welled in her eyes. "Haekyun, you still find ways to make me fall for you." He smiled softly, brushing his thumb along her jaw. Then let's never stop falling. They walked through the garden, hand in hand, surrounded by petals drifting through the air. A moment so peaceful it felt like a dream. On their final night in Jeju, they lay side by side on the villa's rooftop, wrapped in a single blanket, staring up at the endless stars. Treasure whispered, "Do you ever think about what our life would have been if I hadn't been there that day in front of the hospital?" Haekyun turned to her, his eyes glinting in the starlight. "Then my mother would have lost her life, and I would have never found mine." She smiled faintly, eyes glistening. "You still talk like a poet, Dr. Han." He chuckled softly. "That's because I married my muse." The night grew quieter. He pulled her closer, their fingers intertwining, their breathing synchronized, slow, peaceful, infinite. And as the sea whispered below and the stars burned above, Treasure closed her eyes and thought, if love were a place, it would be right here, in his arms under Jeju's sky, forever. The years after Jeju passed like pages of a love poem, each one softer, sweeter, and more timeless than the last. Treasure and Haekyun returned to Seoul with hearts fuller than ever. Their days were no longer defined by work or reputation, but by the quiet joy of being together, in laughter, in silence, in simple things that made life beautiful. Every morning, Haekyun woke before her just to watch her sleep, her face calm, the sunlight brushing against her skin. Sometimes he would whisper almost to himself, "How could I have lived before knowing you?" And every night, Treasure would curl against him, her hand resting on his heart, whispering back, "You didn't live, my love. You were waiting." On their 10th anniversary, Haekyun surprised her once more. He recreated their Jeju villa, right on the hospital rooftop where they had first confessed their love. The same flowers, the same sea breeze scent, the same warmth in the air. When Treasure arrived, dressed in an elegant cream gown, her heart stopped at the sight. Candles lined the rooftop, petals covered the floor, and at the center stood Haekyun, wearing a smile filled with memories. Soft music played in the background, their song, the one they had danced to under the Jeju moon. As she approached, he took her hands in his eyes, glistening. 10 years ago, you saved my mother's life, and unknowingly saved mine. You turned my hospital into a home, my pain into purpose, and my world into something I never want to end. Treasure, if love had another lifetime, I'd still find you, in every one. Tears shimmered in her eyes as she replied, her voice trembling but steady. And if love could take shape, it would look like you, strong enough to protect me, gentle enough to hold me. You've given me a reason to believe in forever. He kissed her hand, then her forehead, then her lips. A kiss that carried years of devotion, trials, and dreams fulfilled. Their family, close friends, and hospital staff stood silently, watching the couple who had taught them that love was not about perfection. It was about grace, healing, and endless giving. Later that evening, they stood on the balcony together, watching the sun dip into the horizon. The sky was painted in hues of rose and gold, just like Jeju's sky that first night they had kissed beneath the rain. Treasure leaned against him, her head resting on his chest. "Do you think love ever ends?" she asked softly. Haekyun smiled, brushing her hair aside. "Not ours. Ours just changes form, from heartbeat to memory, from touch to legacy." She looked up at him, her eyes warm and glistening. "Then promise me something, Haekyun. When the world forgets us, promise that our love will still whisper through the halls of this hospital, in every life we touch." He wrapped his arms around her, holding her tighter than ever. "I promise, Treasure. Our love will never be forgotten, because it healed more than hearts. It healed time itself." Years later, when people walked through the entrance of Seoul Grace Medical Center, they would pause before the great mural that hung in the lobby. It showed a nurse kneeling to save an elderly woman, and beside her, the hospital director reaching out his hand. Below the painting were engraved words that became the hospital's motto. "Love is the greatest medicine. It heals what science cannot." In memory of Treasure Nuru Han and Dr. Han Haekyun, and in the quiet hours of dawn, When the corridors were empty and the city still asleep, the morning light would fall gently across their image, as if the heavens themselves remembered the love story that began with an act of courage and ended with eternity. Because some loves never fade. Some hearts never stop beating for one another. And for Treasure and Haekyeon, their love didn't just heal wounds. It became the heartbeat of a legacy that would live forever. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment. Also share and subscribe to my channel and click on the notification icon so that you will get notified whenever a new story is uploaded.